Hello, friends. It's Elena,
And this is Candace.
and you are listening to Cousins on Crime. So today we are talking about Betsy Faria. Have you heard of this one, Candace?
That name sounds familiar.
It's come to light within the last year or so. The murder actually happened in 2011, but there were some changes in the case.
Okay, I'm excited.
All right. So Betsy, she was found stabbed to death in her home in Troy, Missouri on December 27th, 2011. So to shine some light on Betsy, she was a mother, a daughter, a wife, and a friend. Her husband, Russ Faria, says that she was a real outgoing person. What he noticed first about her was she had beautiful eyes and a beautiful smile and such a bubbly personality. He says, I guess that's what kind of drew me to her. Betsy met her husband when she was working at a local gas station, and she had a part-time DJ business called Party Starters. I think that's a great name,
Nice.
huh?
Yeah.
Well, and
Let's get it started.
her theme song? No, I don't know.
Yeah.
But Russ says that she was the party starter. She was the one to get everyone playing games or up and dancing and always had to be on the go. Betsy was the one to initiate the relationship with Russ, and she asked him out first. They went to a local casino and really hit it off.
Nice.
I know. Sweet. Russ started helping Betsy with her business, and they got married in 2000. Betsy had 2 daughters from a previous relationship named Mariah and Leah Day.
I know. I know where I know this name.
Okay, so
Yes, I know this case.
rings a bell. So Russ was now helping Betsy raise them, and they loved to go camping and play sand volleyball. And according to Russ, Betsy always had a lot of hobbies and loved being outdoors, playing tennis or other games. She liked to play cards or board games.
Soul sister.
Yeah, exactly. I think we would be really good friends because I love volleyball. I love playing games.
Yeah.
So. Betsy had worked in insurance once before, and she decided to go back to that kind of work, and so she went to work at State Farm. She met a woman there named Pam Hupp at the State Farm office where both women worked, and Betsy trained Pam, and they only worked there for a short period of time together, really just acquaintances. But whenever they stopped working there, they lost touch for several years. In January of 2010, Betsy was diagnosed with breast cancer. And around that time, Betsy and Pam reconnected, and they often took walks together while Russ was at work. And he worked from home. I think he was an IT guy, is what I read. Betsy's dad, Ken Meyer, in an article with St. Louis Magazine, he talked about Betsy asking him to take her to one of her treatments at the cancer center, but when he got there to take Betsy, Pam was already there sitting beside her, so he felt that he couldn't really talk to Betsy, and from then on, Pam was the one that took took Betsy to most of her appointments. It was also mentioned that Betsy had a number of friends and family that stepped in and wanted to help. And I think that says a lot about,
Yeah.
how loved she was. A lot of
Yeah.
times when you go through a cancer type situation, people kind of scatter and they don't know how to deal with it, but seemed like they all wanted to.
Yeah. It's kind of like a little bit awkward because you want to be supportive, but you're not sure. Suddenly you don't know what they could need.
Right.
Or how they could need your support. So,
Yeah, you don't want to be in their space, but you want to help, and
Yeah.
people always say, let me know if you need anything. Well, I'm the type of person
Right.
that's like, I'm not going to tell
You
you.
wouldn't.
I'm just going to
Yeah,
deal
exactly.
with it. But it seemed like her friends and family really put themselves in her life to help her out.
That's good.
So it seemed like Betsy had beaten cancer, and she and Russ planned a celebration of life cruise for November of 2011 with their friends and family. But before the trip, Betsy got news that the cancer had spread and was terminal this time.
No.
Yes. So Russ said there were bad days and good days. They both cried a lot, especially when she got sick the second time and they found out it was terminal. And basically, he says, we weren't going to have too much time around anymore.
Ugh.
Russ said plenty of tears were shed, but Betsy relied on her positive and outgoing attitude to get her through. She decided to go on the cruise and got to mark off something on her bucket list, which was swimming with the dolphins.
Aw.
That sounds fun.
Yeah.
So he says on the good days where the chemotherapy effects were minimal, she would play tennis and spend time with family. I love that she wasn't going to let cancer beat her.
Yeah.
Like, she was like, no, I'm still going to do the things that I love.
Mm-hmm.
She didn't want to be sad, Russ said. She knew she had a lot of sad days ahead of her, and she was going to make every day as happy as she could for herself and for those around her. And that's what she did throughout her entire life, and what she did up until the end. So on December 27th, Betsy stayed at her mother's house that day after a chemo treatment, which was about a 30-minute drive from her home. Russ planned to go to his regular game night that he went to every week with friends. The game they played is a role-playing game like Dungeons and Dragons. It wasn't Dungeons and Dragons, but I'm not sure what it was called, but it was like that. So he texted Betsy around noon on the 27th, and he told her that he would pick her up from her mother's house later that night when he was done with his friends, because it was on his route home. Betsy later texted Russ telling him that Pam had offered to take her home, according to St. Louis Magazine. Russ texted her back and said, "She's bringing you?" And Betsy replied, "Yeah, she offered and I accepted. Didn't get much sleep. Mom snored."
Aw.
I know. Okay, so let's go over the timeline of Russ's evening, starting when he finished work. So Russ finished work and left the Faria home around 5 p.m. On his way to his friend's house, he made 4 stops. From 5:16 to 5:20, he stopped to get gas at a Conoco station in Troy, Missouri.
Mm-hmm.
From 5:31 to 5:32, he stopped to buy cigarettes at a U-Gas in Wentzville.
Okay.
At 5:52, he bought a bag of dog food at Green's Country Store in Lake St. Louis.
Okay, so he was like, okay, I need gas. And then he gets back on the road and he's like, wait, I need cigarettes. And then he gets back on the road and he's like, wait, I need dog food.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
It's like a guy.
Yeah, like, why can't you get these things all at one place? So the fourth stop that's mentioned is at from 5:56 to 5:58. He was in an O'Fallon, Missouri quick trip buying 2 bottles of iced tea.
Okay.
So all these, it seems like a whole lot of unnecessary stops, but he had reasons. He gave his reasons. He says he went to do 2 different stores because the cigarettes were $1 cheaper at the gas station, and he had a rewards card for the dog food at the other store. But hey, those were his reasons.
Okay, I believe this because that's something my husband would do. Literally, if something is 1 cent cheaper, he would go 20 minutes out of the way. I don't know why he's like that, but he is. So, I kind of believe that there are people out there like this.
Every penny matters, y'all.
No, it doesn't. Time is money.
Well, okay, I see your point. So his first, second, and fourth stops were recorded on camera with CCTV, and he had a time-stamped receipt from Green's. Russ got to his friend's, I think his name was Corbin, his friend Corbin's house around 6 p.m. So he left his house at 5, got to his friend's at 6 after those 4 stops. One of the 6 friends that normally attended game night was stuck at work, leaving the group without the 6 players necessary for their usual game.
Man.
So the other 5 just, I know, bummer. They decided just to go ahead and hang out, smoke marijuana, and watch some movies.
Some doobs.
Yeah. At around 9 p.m., partway through the second movie that they were watching, the group decided to call it a night and head home. On the way, he stopped at the Arby's on Raymond Drive in Lake St. Louis. His receipt shows that he ordered 2 junior cheddar melts at 9:09 p.m. Russ then made the 25-mile trip home, which officers would later clock at 26 minutes and 30 seconds. He grabbed the bag of dog food from the back seat of his car and walked inside. He set the dog food down just inside the door, took off his coat, and saw Betsy lying on the floor. At 9:40 p.m., he called 911. Throughout the call, Russ was sobbing. He told the dispatcher that he believed his wife had completed suicide and mentioned that he could see the knife sticking out of her neck.
Oh.
He said that she had mentioned suicidal thoughts previously. The call lasted exactly 10 minutes. Shortly before Russ hung up, Lincoln County Sheriff's Deputy Christopher Hollingsworth arrived on the scene. Recognizing that Betsy's wounds were inconsistent with a suicide, Hollingsworth took Russ out of the house. The house was cleared and medical and fire personnel went inside. The family dog was in the backyard on a chain, and a second knife was found under the pillow Betsy had been using on the couch.
Yikes.
Yeah. So investigators, they immediately suspected Russ, partly from the 911 call, partly because of the reports from Pam Hupp, and you know, the husband, it's always the husband, right?
Yeah.
They said that he sounded frantic, and then the next minute he was calm and collected, like he kept going back and forth. How are you supposed to act when you find your wife?
And that's the thing. I think, you know, maybe when you're being asked questions on the phone and you're trying to respond to those questions, and then you catch your wife on the floor out of the corner of your eye, and then you're frantic again, and then you're trying to answer the questions.
You try to compose yourself.
Yeah, this is why it's really important not to say, well, I wouldn't behave that way, because it can pretty much
you just don't know.
Exactly.
Yeah, so people react differently. We may not understand, but it's a process of emotions, and everybody. Yeah. So also a pair of Russ's slippers were found in the bedroom closet and had blood on them. However, A crime scene investigator said there had been no bloody footprints in the home, nothing that matched the soles of those tan slippers. Russ was questioned for nearly a day by detectives. So earlier I mentioned that the officers would later clock Russ's trip at 26 minutes and 30 seconds. Well, they came up with that time by speeding from point A to point B, from his friend's house to Russ's house.
Okay.
And they didn't even stop at the Arby's that Russ stopped at.
Okay.
To
so
come up with this time. So they're like,
yeah.
oh yeah, he had time to get to his house and kill her because we were able to do it in 26 minutes, you know.
Yeah, I mean, and to like, you may stop at Arby's and it may take 20 minutes, or you may stop at Arby's and it may take 5 minutes. So even if they did stop at Arby's, you know what I'm saying? Like, there's a lot to consider.
Right.
But they didn't stop, so they didn't do their due diligence.
They did not calculate it accurately. So Pam Hupp told police the couple had a troubled marriage. Investigators arrived at Pam Hupp's home around 6:40 a.m. the morning after Betsy was killed. Hupp answered the door with wet hair and informed the officers that she had just finished showering. So they're there at her house the next morning because they know that she was the last person to see her alive.
Yeah.
Because she's the one that took Betsy home from her mother's.
Uh-huh.
But she told officers that she had showered the night before after returning home from dropping Betsy off as well. So
Why?
She's telling them.
Why did she tell them that?
Shower when I got home. Right. Why is that important? She initially told the officers that she had not gone into the Faria home when she dropped off Betsy, but later stated twice that she had. It was like, well, yeah, I just went in the door. And then, oh yeah, I went in and she wanted to show me something. So her story kept changing. Pam emphasized how creepy Betsy's house had looked the night before. Dark, but with the doors unlocked. And how she thought Russ was home early because a silver Nissan Maxima was in the driveway.
What?
So she set the stage that Russ was home. She's saying she just dropped off Betsy, let Betsy go inside.
So she's like, I wasn't the last person to see her alive.
Right. She stated that she and Betsy were very close friends who saw each other nearly every day, but that she was not sure about the route to or from Betsy's home.
What?
Huh? Like, if you're somebody's good friend, but you don't know how to get...
If you're someone's good friend, you've been to their house 3 different types of ways. Like, you've been there the direct route, you've been there, the quickest route. You would know about 3 different ways to get to their house.
Right. I mean, you've picked her up and taken her to several treatments.
Uh-huh.
You walk with her almost every day. I'm confused about that.
Yeah, same.
So the officers asked Pam about the fact that Betsy had recently named Hupp as a beneficiary on a $150,000 life insurance policy, replacing Russ. Pam told officers that Betsy wanted her daughters to have the money, but did not trust them to manage it responsibly, and that she didn't trust Russ. Pam also told the officers that the Faria's marriage was on the rocks and that Russ had been physically abusive. She claims that Betsy told her that on one occasion, Russ held a pillow over Betsy's face when she was sleeping. And when Betsy awoke, she asked him why he did that, and he told her he just wanted her to know what it felt like to die.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's Pam's story. These allegations could not be corroborated by Betsy's other friends or family. Now, Betsy's daughters have said that their marriage was no walk in the park and that they did argue a lot. I also read that they did separate at one point, but eventually decided that they loved each other and wanted to stay together.
Yeah. Whose marriage is a walk in the park, anyways?
I don't know a one. So Pam also told officers about a document on Betsy's computer that indicated that Betsy was afraid of Russ. Pam said that she had never seen the document. However, she described the substance of the document in detail.
Oh.
The officers also examined Pam's phone, and there were numerous text messages between Pam and Betsy on the day of the murder, including several in which Pam insisted on picking Betsy up from her chemotherapy appointment and taking her home.
That's so annoying. Don't be that clinger where, you're hounding your sick friend. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I've had a couple friends like that, insert
themselves. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so awkward. And she's sick, so she doesn't have the energy to keep fending this woman off. She's like, okay, fine,
Yeah. So they see all these text messages of her insisting that she pick up Betsy, despite the fact that Betsy's mother's house was an hour-long round trip for Pam compared to the short trip Russ would have taken to pick her up from game night. So, evidence showed that Betsy died sometime after 7 p.m. So, around 7 p.m., Betsy had called her friend Laurel Morin to cancel a scheduled tennis game due to Betsy's blood results.
Aww.
Yeah, and she had just had chemo, but Betsy's daughter, Leah Day, she told police that she also spoke to her mother on the phone around 7 p.m. on that night, on the night of her murder, and Leah was headed to the cell phone store to get a new phone and needed Betsy to speak to the store representative as the account holder to authorize the upgrade.
Okay.
And Betsy assured Leah that she would be sitting on the couch with her phone next to her waiting for her call. But when Leah called from the store at 7:21, Betsy didn't answer.
Oh,
Leah called again at 7:26 and at 7:30. And Betsy did not answer.
Oh, man.
It's really sad to think that might have been the time she was being attacked.
And it's really sad to think that her daughter was probably really pissed off because she was like,
yes,
Mom, you're supposed to answer my call. And she called her back 3 times. I've driven all the way to the store. And just to think she would find out what happened to her. Oh my God. That's
right. Exactly. That reminds me, just yesterday, Chris and I left the house. Grayson was on his phone, awake. And an hour, we left him home. An hour later, we're calling him, trying to ask him a question. He's not answering. I think we called him 20 times.
Oh
and
my
Chris
gosh.
Chris was like, he's gonna get it when we get home. I'm so mad. He knows better.
And you're like, don't say that. I hope
and
he's
I was
okay.
I said, you're gonna be sad if we get home and something's wrong with him.
Yeah.
So,
well, was he okay when you got home?
He was good. He called back a little bit later and was like, I'm sorry, I was asleep. My phone was on silent. So, anyway, back to the story. Betsy also had a missed call from Pam. So Pam called at 7:27, and when officers asked Pam about the missed call at 7:27, she told them that she was just calling Betsy to inform that she reached the part of the drive where she knew where she was and that she could safely make it home.
Okay,
Do you
know
think
what?
She was putting a timestamp of...
Yeah, I do. And you know what's more believable? Calling to see how she was feeling, maybe. Like she was
Right.
just
If
not
you
feeling well
know
on the
your
drive
friend is
home.
exactly. You're not if
That's
you
a
know
little more
someone's trying to just
believable.
go in and go to sleep, like you're going to call them and wake them up just to tell them that, "Okay, I'm safe now."
Yeah,
No.
no, no.
So she said she didn't want Betsy to worry. She later offered two slightly different reasons for calling. Again, her story keeps changing. The last evidence that Betsy was alive was the voicemail from Pam's phone to Pam's husband Mark's phone at 7:04. When Pam left a voicemail for Mark, Betsy could be heard in the background. So
Okay.
Russ called 911 around 9:40, creating a time of death window of 7:04 to 9:40. Investigators and first responders did say that in their experience, it looked as though she had been dead for several hours. She was stiff and the blood around her had started to dry. At about 2 p.m. the day after the murder, Russ was taken to the Lake St. Louis Police Department for a polygraph. The test indicated deception when he was asked whether he killed Betsy or knew who did. Mind you, he had been up around 36 hours at this point and had smoked marijuana.
Okay. And
So how?
also, at this point, did he know that she was murdered? Because when he got home and he called 911, he said, "Oh, I think she completed suicide." That's like his first
Right.
thought because of her state of mind. So, did they tell him, like, no, she was murdered?
I'm assuming so because it was about 2 o'clock the next day when he did the polygraph. And so,
Okay.
like earlier, like the night of the murder, he was taken to the police station. And I'm sure they said, "Look, dude, this
Okay.
is not suicide. She was brutally stabbed."
Yeah.
Um, and
I
she,
asked because, like, that question could have elicited a
like a
some kind of
confusion.
physical response. Yeah, or confusion.
Right, right. So, following the polygraph, Russ was handcuffed and placed under arrest for the murder of his wife.
Okay, because of a polygraph, which we know is not admissible.
Exactly.
Okay.
Right. Well,
Okay.
and police were like, "Oh, he says it was a suicide, but it's obviously a murder." And
Well, nobody comes home and thinks, like, if you know your wife's state of mind and that's
right,
just the first thing he thought, you don't think, "Oh, my wife's been murdered." That's like it's a far
exactly.
jump to go that way. So,
Yeah, yeah. And you don't want to think of someone coming into your home and how could
no.
someone murder my wife?
My sick wife that's dying of cancer.
Right. Exactly. So, despite confirming that there was no DNA from Betsy on Russ's clothes, feet, or hands, and mind you, Russ was still wearing the clothes that he had on in the CCTV videos from earlier in the night, and he had zero blood on him.
Okay.
She was stabbed 55 times.
Okay, so he was
Where's
wearing one of those white paper suits.
uh
Right?
or
Where's
he
that?
took I think I read one of the reports I read was that they said he had taken off his clothes and enticed her to have sex and then killed her and then put his clothes back on. Like that explained him not having any blood on his clothes. Like
Okay.
he took off his clothes after the murder, he showered and put on the same clothes.
Okay.
They were reaching.
Really reaching.
Yeah. So, despite all that and verifying his airtight alibi, like Russ's friends and family, or his friends, the four other friends that he went to game night with, they all like corroborated his story, said, yes, he was here with us, he left at
Yeah.
this time. Despite all of that, they still didn't believe him. Russ's friends and family, including Betsy's daughters, ended up turning on him.
So sad.
Which is very sad. It is.
Yeah.
Russ was arrested. He was tried, convicted, and sentenced to life in prison.
Oh my God.
Yes. So the facts were clearly ignored in this case.
Yeah, sounds like it.
Russ and his attorney, Joel Schwartz, tried to point out the suspicions about Pam, but was not allowed to bring these facts up in court.
What?
Yeah. Their story was that, the prosecutor was like, no, I know it was Russ. You can't bring this up. Yeah. So their story, they tried to say that that she waited until Betsy was weak and lethargic from chemotherapy that day and gave her a ride home, knowing that Betsy's husband, Russ, would not be there. And court documents alleged that Pam had dipped Betsy's socks in her own blood and spread it around the house to make it look like her husband killed her in a domestic assault. And they also said that the tan slippers, Russ's slippers, were dipped in blood. Like, you could tell it wasn't stepped in blood, it was dipped in blood and then thrown in the closet.
Yeah, we've talked about this in, I feel like, every single episode we've done, that if you're the murderer, you're stepping in blood, you're making footprints, you're dragging it from here to there.
Especially if you stab them 55 times.
Exactly. Yeah.
There was the document showing that Betsy had made Pam the beneficiary of her life insurance policy instead of her husband. Russ and Betsy's other friends and family members said they knew nothing about this change. Apparently, the way that it happened was Pam took Betsy to the library and had the librarian sign as a witness and then mailed it into State Farm.
What?
Like, I always thought you had to have it notarized. Maybe the librarian was a notary.
Yeah. I think that's probably why they went to the library.
Yeah, maybe.
But still, that's very, behind the curtain type of behavior. But
it's just, so there's this witness, the librarian was the witness that Betsy did sign the document. The family and Russ was just really confused.
Yeah.
Mr. Schwartz says it was painfully obvious to him that she was involved in the murder, but for some reason the cops trusted her. He even remarked that if she told the investigators that a monkey ran into the house, they would believe that too.
Some people just have that smooth talk.
Yeah, during her questioning, they said that she was just very cool, nonchalant. So yeah, she had that stigma about her.
Show any type of emotion, and that was okay. But when the husband didn't, was frantic and then unemotional, that was not okay.
Right. So Schwartz says that there was no alternate suspect put in front of the jury, so the jury figured it must have been him. So he feels like that's why he was convicted, because the jury didn't have reasonable doubt. It couldn't have. Yeah.
They weren't able to bring some form of defense at all because. Right. Yeah, they were very limited in what they could and couldn't say, and what they could and couldn't bring in.
Right, exactly. The defense lawyer filed an appeal, and a new trial was granted for Russ in late 2015. Russ Faria's conviction was later overturned, and at his retrial... Woo! At his retrial in November of 2015, Faria's defense attorney, Joel Schwartz, he was able this time to present his suspicions and pointed to Pam Hupp as the person with the motive and opportunity to kill Betsy. There was not a jury at the second trial. Russ had waived Yeah, he waived his right to a jury trial. Pam was not called by either side to testify. She did testify in the first
The
trial,
first one.
and
Mm-hmm.
so this time she did not. Yeah, this time Faria was found not guilty by the judge.
Nice.
The Lincoln County prosecutor at the time, who led the state's case against Russ at both trials, continued to maintain that Russ was Betsy's killer. Like, she was like, nope, it's him. I know it's him. That's what I'm going with.
Oh, Lord.
So Dateline later wanted to do a segment on this story, and that struck a nerve with Pam. She felt that she needed to get the attention back on Russ and off of her. In August of 2016, Pam shot and killed a man she claimed had accosted her in her driveway of her home, demanding that to give her Russ's money and threatening to kill her.
Huh?
So it says what Pam did was she went around acting like a Dateline producer and asked if they wanted to act out a scene in a segment that they were doing about a 911 call.
Oh my gosh.
Louis Gumpberger was the one she chose. Investigators determined that the man, Louis Gumpberger, was not an intruder, but was instead a unwitting participant in the scheme that Pam had devised to frame Russ Faria and portray him as the violent person. Investigators believe that Hupp lured Gumpberger. I'm saying that wrong. Gumpenberger. Louis Gumpenberger. I'm sorry.
Sorry, Louis.
She lured him into her car with a bogus promise of money to reenact a 911 call for the upcoming episode, something Dateline said they would never do. So don't be fooled, guys.
Yeah.
Pam called 911 while she shot Louis in her driveway to make it look like he was an intruder that Russ had sent to get his $150,000 and kill her. So, like, on the 911 call, she's yelling at him, "No, get away," or something like that. I don't know.
Oh.
A week after the incident, Hupp was charged with Gumpenberger's murder. So a week. So they did a better job in this one.
What, but a week? I mean...
Well, it's
oh, well,
better
I guess
than
you know what? Yeah,
5
that's
years
true.
later. So she was charged, and in the summer of 2019, Hupp entered an Alford plea in the case, allowing her to avoid the death penalty trial. So with the Alford plea, she didn't admit the guilt, but it's an acknowledgement that prosecutors had enough evidence to convict her of killing Gumpenberger. She was sentenced to life in prison.
Oh.
That case prompted newly elected Lincoln County prosecuting attorney Mike Wood to reopen Betsy Faria's murder case, which eventually led to the charges, and Pam Hupp has repeatedly denied having involvement in Betsy's murder.
I'm sure.
And something else to point out about Pam, there's a suspicion that she killed her own mother. She told the court that she told the court that her mom had died of Alzheimer's, and her family said that her mother did have some memory loss or some dementia, but her actual cause of death was from a fall from a third-story balcony.
Oh, yes.
And
I mean, I'm not saying, oh, yes. I'm saying it's, the details of this case are coming back to me now. So, yes, I remember that. Oh, poor lady.
Yes. So
give birth to the spawn of Satan, and that's how you go.
So, her mother also had 8 times the typical dose, 8 times of Ambien in her system.
Gosh.
Pam's brother, Michael Newman, he filed a wrongful death suit against the residence where his mother lived, and the manufacturer of the railing of the balcony.
Oh, brother.
Yeah. He later dropped the suit after Pam was charged with Gumpenberger's murder, saying it just would have been a circus.
Yeah.
So what happened to the life insurance money?
Tell me.
Pam did get it. She testified that she felt pressured by prosecutors and police to set up a trust for the Faria's 2 daughters. However, the trust was a revocable trust, and so guess what? She revoked the trust after
Gross.
Russ's conviction. Yeah, just ugly, ugly, ugly.
Gross.
Betsy's daughters, they did sue Pam for the life insurance money. A St. Charles County jury ruled in favor of Pam.
What?
The daughters appealed, but an appellate court upheld the original ruling. So after hearing all this, I'm not sure I would ever want a jury trial in this with the citizens of St. Charles County, Missouri.
I was just about to say.
I would be so afraid.
I know. I was just about to say, like, thinking about Russ's trial and how the second time around he's like, no, let's do a bench trial because these people are stupid.
I don't trust them. And then here they are, like, on Pam's side again.
Oh, Lord. I wish they would have had a bench trial in the Casey Anthony case, too. Those jurors were, just don't start me on that.
No, that's a rough one. So Betsy's daughter, Mariah, who was just 17 years old when her mother was killed, she described the traumatic loss of her mom at such a young age. She says, it was a time where I was supposed to figure out my next steps in the world, and then I got my whole world shaken up when my mom passed away, and I basically lost my father in the process, she said. Her other daughter, Leah, told the news outlet, it's her mom's positive outlook that keeps her daughters going today. Mariah and I are so strong, she said. We are very strong women, and we have our own beautiful families that we've grown, and life could not be better at the moment. So in July 2021, almost a decade after Betsy's death, Lincoln County Prosecutor Mike Wood announced that Pam Hupp would be charged with first-degree murder in Betsy's death.
Nice.
Yes. Wood described the facts in the case as quite simply indisputable. He's a smart guy.
Yeah.
According to the NBC News podcast, The Thing About Pam. So Hupp has pled not guilty and continues to maintain her innocence, and Mike Wood says he will be seeking the death penalty, saying he does not take the decision lightly. So to kind of conclude, Pam is in prison for life for the murder of Louis Gumpenberger, and she is still awaiting trial for the murder of Betsy Faria. So the charges were put on her in July of 21. So we're a year later. We all know, or most of us know, that it takes a couple years to go to trial. So she's still awaiting trial for that. And Russ, he eventually was granted a settlement of $2 million in a civil suit case, or in a civil suit case against the officers who mishandled the case that led to his conviction.
Good.
So there's a positive for him. There is a 6-part series that premiered on NBC March 8th of 22 called The Thing About Pam. It stars Renee Zellweger, who wears a fat suit in the series, and Josh Duhamel. It really chaps my hide that there's a series highlighting Pam because I don't want her to get the fame for it.
Did you watch it?
I didn't.
Okay, I've watched it. That's why it was kind of like, when you were telling me all the details, I was like, okay, I've heard this somewhere, I've seen it somewhere. I watched it, and I also was like, why is this all about Pam instead of
Yeah.
Betsy and her life? But it really does show just how manipulative she was. And
Yeah.
oh my gosh, Renee Zellweger. She's not my favorite actress, but
Right.
wow. She
Yeah.
got it spot on. Spot on.
Yeah. Yeah. So critics have said that Renee Zellweger did a fantastic job. There was other criticism that they didn't like the comedic tone that was used to convey a real life murder.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, a positive is that Pam does not get the proceeds from the show. So I do appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
Friends and family say that the portrayal of the characters were inaccurate. So even though people think that Renee Zellweger did a fantastic job, I guess the family and friends say that it wasn't all accurate. Mariah Day says that her mother deserves so much more than her mother is being represented in the series. She says, I understand that they're bringing awareness to wrongful convictions and manipulative people, but I think there are so many other ways that they can do other than making people's real life tragedies into a dramatized TV show and entertainment. I mean, so that's difficult, I'm sure, for the family to see all of that, but you're right, it does bring awareness to friends that you have to be careful with.
Yeah. I mean, and kind of red flags and things that maybe feel uncomfortable to you, but you just are trying to be a people pleaser or just do what's easiest. I do think she has a point about the dramatization of that series, because it really did have a comedic element. It was kind of like a dark humor, which I personally like. But so that's my kind of comedy, but it gets lost that this is a true story, and Betsy is kind of like an undertone of the story, instead of this is a victim and Russ is a victim. And so taking what Mariah stated, she mentioned the wrongful conviction. Has she reconnected with Russ at all?
No. Yeah, all the reports that I've read say that Russ and the two daughters have not reconnected, and they just don't have a relationship anymore.
That's so sad to me.
It is very sad.
I mean, they're all each other has. I mean, I'm so glad the sisters have each other, but it just makes me so sad. I think Betsy would just be so sad about all this.
Yeah, as much as a bubbly personality that she had, and just love that she had to give. Yeah, and there may be underlying things that we don't know about the family. I mean, the daughters did say that Russ and Betsy did fight all the time, so maybe we don't know what really has gone on.
Yeah, and you can't fault them for leaning into what the police say. And, in that situation, you're trying to blame somebody for what's happened. So I don't fault them for
the truth. I don't know if they've ever talked or said apologies to each other, or but it just says that they don't have a relationship anymore.
Hey, didn't Pam try to complete suicide?
Yes, and I meant to put that in here. Yes, so when she was taken in for questioning, she asked for a pen and paper, and then later asked to go to the restroom. And in the restroom, she stabbed herself in the neck and slit her wrist with a pin. Just
a last effort.
Yeah. Well, she's still alive.
Good Lord.
She's got, in some of her mugshot pictures, she has bandages on her neck. It reminded me of Tyler Holder. How he had
yes, I was about to say throat. Tyler Holder vibes.
Yeah. So, Mariah went on to say that her mom was probably the most unique person you'd ever meet, and she
Aw.
touched so many lives. And so that's the main reason I wanted to do this story is because I was irritated that Pam got so much recognition for this case, and I feel like Betsy Faria needed to have shine some light on her because she was a beautiful person.
Yeah, I think a lot of times the media will latch on to a perpetrator, and it sucks because because it's interesting. It's like, oh, how could anyone do this? And in our last episode, it was really hard for me to find any information about the victims, like where they came from, what their parents did, and it was all about Anthony Ayers, and it was all about his life and what he did and going to prison and what he did in prison. And it does suck that the media sometimes is a little more interested in the killer, the murderer, because it's sensational and it's something to talk about.
Well, and that's what we are here for, is to give credit where credit is due.
Thanks for telling us about Betsy. I feel like I know her a little bit better.
Well,
and I love her business, the Party Starters.
That's
know. Really cool.
Yes, so I'm sorry if you've heard this story a few other times with other true crime podcasts, but this just stuck out to me and what I latched onto this week. So,
well, I think you told it the best I've ever heard.
Well, thanks.
Just being honest.
All right, y'all, we'll let you go.
Thank you for listening.
Yes, hope you had a good hour with us. Almost hour, maybe. I don't know how long it's been, but...
Whatever you were doing. Running, driving to work, sitting at work, watching the clock.
Falling asleep to our voices. I think my dad told me that my mom falls asleep when she listens to us. Because they listen, like, when they're going to bed, they'll listen together, and he looks over and she's asleep.
That's so cute.
I have
Good night,
been
Aunt
told,
Karen.
Good night, night. I've been told that I do have a soothing voice, so I'm sorry if I put you to sleep. Okay.
You do. I think you do. Hey, we should start like that app where everybody does like little readings. What is it? Is it the Calm app? Like Keith Morrison does one, which I would personally listen to when I'm trying to fall asleep.
Yeah.
Yeah, we should do one of those.
I will, usually I go to look for bedtime stories, and it's these people like talking with calm, slow voice. Yeah. Sorry.
Sorry if we put you to sleep. Wake up! Maybe don't listen to us when you're driving.
Yeah. Good point.
All right, we'll see you on the flippity flop.
Love you guys.
Bye now.
Bye.